Ever watch someone change personalities right before your eyes? Unfortunately for my home health care nurse Rita and I, that's exactly what my husband Jim did when he got home from work during the last hour of my infusion. Stay tuned in this episode, part 26B, when my nurse Rita watches Jim change personalities and spark a confrontation with me, and she has to watch me launch into defensive mode against him. Hi, I'm Sarah Wilder, and this is Surviving the Man I Married, part 26B. Okay, so without even pausing to check if I was asleep or Rita was busy, Cowboy Jim sauntered into our basement space, intruding on my treatment. He took a stance directly in front of Rita and I, each of us in recliners, the TV in front of us, and he blocked the TV. He was blathering on about some work story he had begun telling while on the stairs when he couldn't even see us. When I tried to stem his intrusion and stop him from speaking, to direct him to leave, he became immediately confrontational. I countered with, and this was a tense back and forth, I countered with his ignorance and rudeness, reminding him of the rules, reminding of his agreement to abide by them, and that it was unacceptable for him to even be in there. And then he countered with painting himself as the victim, that he was only there to check on me, to see if I or Rita needed anything at all. And he said I was being hateful, I was being nasty. However, at that juncture, I reminded Jim, Cowboy Jim, that as of that moment, he had not once asked me how I felt or if I needed anything. So the intrusion was personally offensive, it was selfish, and it was performative, and it was over. At that insistence, Jim saw Rita was becoming uncomfortable. He wasn't winning. He was starting to look bad in her eyes, and so he paused his stunt. He asked if we needed anything. I handed him my 44-ounce insulated cup and said, sure, I'd love a refill. And he offered to get us snacks, and I accepted that too, just to get him out of there and have a little reprieve, however brief it might be. And once Jim was at the top of the stairs and we heard him in the kitchen performing that task, Rita looked at me. Her eyes were huge. And she said, because keep in mind, Rita was well aware of what happened on Father's Day 17 days earlier when he tried to poison me and end my life. Rita had heard all about it up in that during that infusion up until the point Cowboy Jim intruded. So she was saying, "You're not going to drink anything he brings you or eat any of the food, are you?" And I said, Rita, no way. I just agreed to that to get rid of him. And I'm not touching the drink or the food. And if he brings you anything, don't touch it either. And so we were on the defensive. Okay, so Jim finished his task up in the kitchen, and we could hear him coming back down the stairs. And this time he walked more slowly, and every other step groaned under his weight because he had a really bad knee. It was swollen up like a grapefruit every day after work. And we could hear him favoring that knee as they came down the stairs. Much more calmly, he walked into our space, and to my right, I saw Jim's very long arm stretched between Rita and I. And on the table between our recliners, he set my drink down and he sat like a box of crackers. Then he retracted his arm, and I was hoping, and she was hoping, he'd go back up the stairs. Sorry, my papers are blowing all over the backyard. He'd go back up the stairs and leave us alone. But no, that's not what he did. Narcissist, malevolent Cowboy Jim walked around our chairs and again took up his stance in front of us. And he resumed his ridiculous work story. And at this point, it was no longer performative. This was punitive. He was rebelling. And as he resumed this story no one cared about, I again interrupted him. I derided him and said, "You have to go. You've done your task. This is not acceptable. You're not here to visit. That's not your time to do this. It's my time, and you have to go." So he turned on me nastier than before. I could tell, Rita could tell, the cowboy had taken on that ashen gray pallor to his skin. His pupils were huge. His voice was loud but high pitched. And his stance was just like the cowboy, slackened. He tried to be imposing and intimidating. And he launched into criticizing me for my attitude, my aggressiveness, just turned it on me that I'm attacking him. And this went on for just a tense confrontation for just, I want to say a minute or two. It wasn't that long, but it absolutely shifted the entire energy in the room. So I didn't want this conflict to continue. It was counterproductive. It was embarrassing. And I could tell it was upsetting Rita. Actually, when I looked over at her, her dog had moved to behind Rita and was wedged, all 85 pounds of this German short hair, between the back of the recliner and Rita's body. And Rita had her legs up on the chair, her arms around her knees, and had her phone in her hand. This was not good. I put a stop to it. I got my voice nice and loud. I absolutely interrupted him in like a teacher slash mom voice, and he stopped. He paused. Jim leaned forward and put his face right against my left ear, and he hissed, I see you. I know who you are. You're just like Boyd, and you think you're better than me. And then he stood up and he walked slowly around my left side to behind my chair. And the next thing I know is this hand plopped right down on top of my head, which was bald. I was bald except for some stubble. I shaved my head down to a one. And he dragged his hand as he walked behind my chair. He dragged his heavy, large hand across the top of my head, and it hurt because there were a couple of places where I had cellulitis from all the hair pulling. So physically, Jim had encountered my body. He'd whispered in my ear. He'd stood and blocked the TV and tried to perform in front of us. It was just an extremely negative interaction. And it is the springboard, plus some behavior later that day, that causes me to leave Jim the very next day, July 7th. Please stay tuned for part 26C. I'm Sarah Wilder, and thank you for being here.